The final portion of the offseason program gets underway tomorrow as the Broncos host mandatory minicamp over the next 3 days. Joining me tonight to delve into what we should be watching for as the Broncos take to the field for the final time before training camp, we have James Palmer from the NFL Network, 9 News Broncos insider Mike Klis, and the man from the fan, Cecil Lammey. Guys, we'll get into some of the other key position battles on both sides of the ball coming up a little bit later in the show. But first, we have to start with the signal callers, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. These guys need to show 3 things over the next 3 days: understanding of the offense, ability to read the defense, and how they recover after making a mistake. So starting with the offense, Lock in year 2 of Pat Shurmur's system, Bridgewater, he's familiar with it given his time in Minnesota. What will a really good grasp on the offense look like in 11 on 11s with no live contact?
Well, Alexis, to me, it's speed, right? It's how quickly do you get everything spit out? How quickly do you run the offense? How quickly, this last part is very key, get through your progression. Cecil, how often do I talk about Tom Brady on here, right? So let's do it one more time. I talked to people in Tampa over the last couple of weeks, and what they saw during OTAs and minicamp this time around for Tom Brady, going through his progressions much quicker in a new system for him, right? He's only been in it for a year, very similar to Drew Lock outside of that 20 years of experience prior to getting into that new system with Bruce Arians, right? But we saw that Cecil going into the next camp was going through his progressions quicker. That's one thing I want to see both these quarterbacks do. How do you get from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4? And how quickly do you go through it? And what's your process like? Are your eyes finding things extremely quickly? Those are the things that I want to see early on in this offense, in this OTA mini camp type of time prior to getting to training camp.
Yeah, true mastery of this offense from Drew Lock is what I'll be watching. With Teddy Bridgewater, I know he can go through his progressions. I know he's somewhat familiar with this offense already. He'll know the terminology, how to get through those things quickly. He's a veteran. But with Drew Lock, I need to see that. And also by maintaining his aggression as a passer, something I'm sure that we'll bring up multiple times in watching this quarterback battle, Mike, is like, is Drew Lock just going to check things down? Or is he going to still be aggressive? Read the defense, know what to do, have speed within calling those plays, all those sorts of things. This is all great for Drew Lock. But for me, Mike, it's about him staying aggressive as well, while also being quick through those progressions.
Yes, I hesitate a little bit to put too much into this. They didn't start 11 on 11 till last week.
Right.
It's been so light. You know, there's been very little contact. Vic Fangio, to kind of honor the players' union request, backed off tremendously. So it hasn't been as competitive as it has been in past OTAs, offense versus defense. What we've seen so far, Teddy Bridgewater has looked better than Drew Lock, and it's not that Teddy has looked great. I think he's been fine. He's been good. But Drew Lock looks like he's pressed a little bit. It looks like the coaches, he's trying to obey the coaches, really concentrate a little too hard on the progressions rather than letting it fly. Maybe that's when you want to do it, is in June and late May. He has been checking down, and he still made kind of the same mistakes. Again, we only saw one 11 on 11, a couple 7 on 7 sessions so far, but looks like Teddy Bridgewater is a little bit ahead.
Well, I think we will see more 11 on 11s coming up this week over the next 3 days. So really, in terms of reading the defense, what are some of the biggest takeaways that you hope Lock and Bridgewater gathered over the last couple of weeks and then can improve upon this week?
Well, we're really starting to test him. And I know everybody's saying, Alexis, like, this isn't going to be a quarterback battle until training camp and the preseason. And like, oh, does that mean none of this matters right now? No, that's not the case either. What I'd like to see, Cecil, during this time period is on the other side of the ball and Vic Fangio mix it up a little bit. I don't want to see him go easy on these two quarterbacks in 11 on 11 periods and try to change some things up. I think Vic Fangio has a big role, Cecil, in maybe determining how these guys are doing and what they're going to have in terms of an impression on this coaching staff during that 6-week break, is maybe he mixes it up quite a bit and sees how they react to a couple of those changes.
Right. I'll quote James Hetfield and say, nothing else matters. It's education portion during OTAs. It's evaluation portion during mandatory minicamp. And when, Mike, you tweeted that out last week, like Lock is pressing, I was like, oh man, I hope he doesn't continue to do that. So what's the biggest takeaway is that from those 11 on 11s, as Mike was reporting, like, Lock's a little bit pressing out there. come out and let that stuff go, man. You got to let it go. You've still got to let it fly. I don't want my quarterback to be a robot. You know what I mean? You have to be freewheeling and free thinking and able to kind of improvise as well. It's what the best quarterbacks do, right? Whether it's Tommy Brady, James's number one guy, or
Tommy Brady,
Pat Mahomes, something like that, right? So, Mike, I want to see Lock let some of those playmaking skills that we know he has. We know he can improvise. We know he can sling it down the field. I'd still like to see a little bit of that.
I mean, going into training camp, going into the preseason, I think Drew Lock should be the person to beat because he is the incumbent. And he is the guy that started 17, 18 games for the Broncos the past 2 years. He is their future. He's got the higher upside. But so far, it does look like Teddy Bridgewater has the better of him in many ways. Not just is he throwing the ball a little bit better, but there's a leadership quality to Teddy Bridgewater, a visible leadership. The way he interacts with players, his receivers, his offensive linemen. You can tell he's been a quarterback for a long time. Right now, Drew Lock looks like an athlete playing quarterback, and Bridgewater looks like he's been raised to be a quarterback.
Okay, well, clearly Mike Klis, he has a favorite going into the next 3 days here of minicamp. But Cecil, James, I want to get your thoughts. Given the structure of minicamp, do you guys feel like you could see enough over the next 3 days to have a clear-cut favorite heading into training camp?
Well, I'll jump into this first, Cecil, and just say I won't give my opinion. What I want to say is, even though, and Mike's exactly right, all the evaluation during training camp is going to be the majority of this, but you have to put a very good tape out there over these next couple of days, because it is human nature for these coaches to think about what they saw for the next 6 weeks over these 2 days. I mean, you just can't forget it. You can't see some player go out there and not play that well, Cecil, and then go, well, the real competition is going to start in a couple of weeks. No, you're going to be thinking about what you saw over these couple of days of minicamp during 6 weeks. I want to see Drew Lock go out there and rip it. I want to see him go out there and be the guy that we love talking about, where it's like Brett Favre. He has no memory, right? Go out and throw the same ball and throw it downfield and be aggressive. I get a little nervous if that's the mentality we've known from Drew Lock, and now it's one that's somewhat pressing at the same time.
Right. And listen to Mike's words about leadership. I think that's incredibly important. James, you bring up the coaching staff. I'll bring up the players' side. These players are going to take a break, right, before training camp. And there's going to be buzz among the players of, man, did you see what Teddy did? Or, man, did you see what Lock did? So build that positive momentum, not only putting that good tape out there for those coaches who are evaluating you and are looking at everything that you're doing, but to your players, to your teammates. So when training camp starts, they're excited about you. They're excited to catch passes from you, whether that's Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, or both.
All right, guys.
I think Drew Lock needs a busted play. Off script. Just go wing it like you're in the backyard, Drew. I think that's what he needs here the next couple of days.
I love it. Guys, still to come on Broncos Beat. Lock and Bridgewater aren't the only guys on the offense in the midst of a position battle. We'll discuss some of the other competitions the brewing after the break. Welcome back to Broncos Beat. Alexis Perry here, joined by James Palmer, Mike Klis, and Cecil Lammey. Guys, with minicamp being a mandatory part of the offseason program, we will finally get our first glimpse of running back Melvin Gordon, who did not participate in the voluntary portion over the last month. While Gordon is a veteran, there is no doubt the rookie Javonte Williams has his eye on the starting job as well. So what mentality or approach do you hope Melvin Gordon brings to the UCL Training Center tomorrow?
I hope that Melvin Gordon just believes he's the better back, right? We know that last year, the competition between he and Phillip Lindsay kind of bothered him, honestly. And Phillip Lindsay's, he's aggressive. He's never going to go anywhere. He's going to keep pushing for that top job. Well, that's what Javonte Williams is going to do. And Williams has a skill set that I believe the coaching staff would believe is a larger one, can be a 3-down back, can be a full-time player. So I want Gordon to go in there with the attitude of, this is my job. I'm taking it. There is no doubt, and leave no doubt, right? To remember the Titans, leave no doubt if you're Melvin Gordon out there. And that's
fire quote.
That's going to be, it's going to bring out the best in both, really. And I think that at the end of the day, with 17 games, Mike, you've got to have 2 running backs. You just do. So I love Javonte Williams, my number 1 running back in this class. I think he can be a star, a Pro Bowler in this league, maybe this season. He's that good. But if you're Melvin Gordon, know that you're going up against a great one, and you're pretty good too.
Last year, Melvin got off to a slow start without OTAs, with a condensed training camp. he was slow out of the gates last year, and he got stronger as the season went along. He was much stronger in the final 6 or 7 games. He looked like the Pro Bowl back that the Broncos signed to a 2-year, $16 million deal. So without having the OTAs, I'll be interested to see how well he moves, how quick he is getting through the hole here. It's good that he's coming to minicamp. He doesn't want to give up that $93,000 in fines. That's the primary reason why I think he's showing up for these next 3 days. And then it's a 5-week break. I do think Melvin Gordon is going to find out that Javonte Williams is an honest threat for that number 1 running back job.
Yeah, I want to see him come out, and I want to see him perform well. I want to see how he moves. And I'll be honest, I'll say it. I want to see him stop talking. Like, I want to see him stop going out there and talking about how things weren't exactly lined up for him and he didn't really fit in and all. Like, just go play football. I want to see him go out and dominate and play football as the way Cecil said. I thought it was interesting, though, as he made these press tours throughout this offseason and then didn't show up for voluntary workouts. And I get it. Veterans like to go and work out their bodies with their people. Totally understand it. But at the same time, when he was out there going, I see what they did drafting Javonte Williams. That's one of 2 things, Alexis. He said, 1, it's the last year of my contract. They drafted my replacement. 2, they drafted him to push me, to make me a better player, to have me go out there and perform because somebody now is right behind me pushing me. I like that aspect of it. But one thing he has yet to say throughout this offseason is, I'm going to help this young running back. That has not been said once by Melvin Gordon. I get it, and I get competition. But also, as we mentioned, you need multiple backs in the NFL, and they're going to need Javonte Williams, and they're going to need probably a little bit of tutelage from Melvin Gordon to the young rookie.
At the wide receiver position, there's not much of a battle going on between guys, as much as there's an internal battle for the second-year wideout, Jerry Jeudy, who's coming off a rookie season that was just filled with highs and lows. He takes to the field tomorrow now, battling the 2020 version of himself. So what does Jeudy need to show over the next 3 days to really prove to himself and this staff that he's capable of being a true number 1 wide receiver in this league?
Wouldn't you love to see the headline, #9sports at 9news.com, no drops for Jerry Jeudy? Yeah. Wouldn't that be awesome? And Mike mentioned, popularity of Philip Lindsay. Well, the popularity of Jerry Jeudy in the fan base is pretty lukewarm. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be. This guy could be a superstar, not a star, not like, hey, he's pretty good. No, this guy could be one of the 5 best receivers in the league one day, right? And I know, James, I got my pom-poms out, so Mike, forgive me if I go a little cheerleader here, but Jerry Jeudy is damn good. So if we get through all this mandatory minicamp and there's no drops, he's looking fantastic, and him and Teddy are hooking up for these big plays that we keep seeing from Broncos media, like, it's fantastic. I'd love to see it, Mike.
He's looked good in the OTAs. He's looked great in the OTAs. In fact, I'd have to say he's the guy that's really stood out. Again, was a lot of 7-on-7. So it's a quarterback receiver game that they've been doing in OTAs, and he has been the best with no drops. He looked great when we first saw him last year. It was our first time we set eyes on him, and his ability to plant and get open within a couple steps out of the cut. There's no one like him. But he did have a couple drops in training camp last year. Haven't seen it yet this year. That is what's going to take Jeudy up another level is, concentration and far fewer drops.
Cecil knows I'm usually the negative guy on this, but I'm going to join him in saying I think Jerry Jeudy's going to have a huge year. And I think a big part of last year is if you look at Pro Football Focus, the way they broke it down, yes, he had the fewest number of catches on catchable targets in the NFL. He also had the most number of errant throws by a quarterback that they were the result of a non-catchable ball happening or a catchable ball not happening in the NFL among receivers. He creates unbelievable separation. The one part that really makes me excited is I went down to Alabama for both pro days that they had. And I heard they have a few prospects coming out of there every year. And I talked to a bunch of people that are very close to Jerry Jeudy. And they said, I know you live in Denver, man. You better watch out for Jerry Jeudy this year because of what happened during his rookie season has motivated him beyond belief. Wait till you see what he goes out and does in his next year because we know him. And Alexis, he has been grinding like crazy throughout this offseason to make sure that doesn't happen again. It bothered him, and they said his work ethic has been through the roof.
Wow, Poo Palmer taking the week off.
Like that?
I love it.
Yeah.
Really quick before we go to break, you guys, the exit of Juwan James, we cannot not bring this up at the right tackle position. For the Broncos, they brought in a couple of beasts, Bobby Massey, Cam Fleming, to really fight for that job. So for those who might not know much about those guys, what do they bring to the position and what should we watch for?
Stability with Bobby Massey. In fact, Mike, I'll quickly pass this one to you. I feel better about the right tackle position now than if Juwan James was here and healthy. And that's not a shot at James. That's just how much I really appreciate Massey's game if he's healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Juwan James is going to break down, whether it was next week, next month, 1 month into the game. He was not going to play 17 games. I think the fact that they had a little time, they got 2 veterans who are proven starters. Bobby Massey is the guy that's probably going to start. Fleming has a little more flexibility. I think they're fine there.
Yeah, I think Alexis, real quickly, is, as Mike mentioned it, you got a couple of guys there. Depth is so important on an offensive line. And when you have veterans that have started a lot of games in the NFL, I don't mind a battle there. I think it's going to push all these guys that have been around and played a lot of games. But at the same time, depth is a decent part of this as well.
Yeah, I'll be keeping my eyes peeled on those guys over the next few days for sure. But coming up on Broncos Beat, what does a successful minicamp look like for Denver's defense? Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Broncos Beat. Gentlemen, we all saw PFF's rankings of the top secondaries in the league, which the Broncos ranked number 1 last week. But as you think about all the players that make up this entire defense, do you feel like this is the most established defense we've seen heading into mandatory minicamp since, I don't know, maybe the Super Bowl 50 season, Mike?
Yeah, maybe. I think it's different. What makes it different is all the cornerbacks that they have. I'd be interested to see. They've got 4 top-level elite cornerbacks, and generally 2 play, 3 at the most. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Ronald Darby, Kyle Fuller, Pat Surtain, and Bryce Callahan. All of them making at least $7 million this year. That's a lot of money into the cornerback position. You have Kareem and Justin Simmons in the back end. I'll be interested to see if there's a lot of dime packages, not just nickel, but dime packages for Vic Fangio here during the minicamp.
Well, and as we saw in the Super Bowl with James's favorite team, Tampa Bay, as well, you're going to be versatile within the secondary in today's game. And nickel defense is basically your base package run on about 70% of the time in the NFL. And Pat Surtain is a star. I expect him to start from day one. And if that means Ronald Darby is reserve, well, fine. He's a highly paid reserve then. And he's a really good player. As we've been talking about, the depth on this secondary is fantastic. But Pat Surtain is that dude. And I expect him to show it often in mandatory minicamp, training camp, and the regular season.
Cecil, what do we talk about all the time, right? We love Vic Fangio's mind, how he plays with this defense, what he can do. What do? You have that much talent back there? Get creative. Find different things you want to do with all of your players, because you put the best players on the field that can play and help you. Obviously, position matters. Obviously, all of that comes into play. But I'd like to see him get a little bit creative. And the other part that I'm excited about, and you mentioned Super Bowl 50, Alexis, is I want to see Bradley Chubb and Von Miller rushing the quarterback at the same time. I mean, everybody has been dying for this since Chubb's rookie year to see it happen, and it just hasn't happened. I'm really excited to see what that deep secondary does, what the rest of this team can do when offenses have to worry about both of those guys going after a quarterback.
You bring up the outside linebackers. I have to bring up the inside linebacker position. That's one to watch. You know, a couple of coverage guys like Justin Strnad and Baron Browning in the mix. How much do you see those two guys pushing Alexander Johnson and Josie Jewell? And what are some key attributes of those guys that might help one or even both of them earn a starting position?
Yeah, Baron Browning had a knee, a leg injury. He hasn't been out there the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I think that's really going to hurt him. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's going to push for playing time much at all at inside linebacker to begin the season. Special teams, yes. Eventually get into inside linebacker, yes. But Justin Strnad, yes. I do think he'll be in there, maybe in some pass rushing downs. But otherwise, it's still the same. I think it's Josie Jewell and Alexander Johnson. I think they're pretty good. Obviously, coverage is a different issue. Maybe that's where that extra cornerback comes in. And Fangio's going to use that to cover the Kelseys of the world.
Right. Well, not only does Mike Klis think they're pretty good, but PFF ranked the inside linebackers fairly high as well. And they are against the run. I mean, Josie Jewell's a throwback. inside linebacker, Chris Spielman type, right? Where he's just going to be there on every type of play. Go Bucks, indeed. Alexander Johnson is a freight train, right? He's just going to run over people, and he's a heat-seeking missile as a run defender. It comes down to coverage. That's where both of these guys struggle. And if we look at where's the weak spot on the Broncos defense, it's inside linebacker. Even if they are strong, even if they are good, the rest of the defense is great. So they've got to elevate their game and make sure that if they are exposed in coverage, that they are doing good things against guys like Darren Waller, against guys like Travis Kelce, and all of these great tight ends that they'll see.
You had to bring up Darren Waller. I love it.
He did. But that's what I was going to say, though. Like, what if you went out there and took the length of Patrick Surtain and the size of Patrick Surtain, and that was your answer for Darren Waller or Travis Kelce? I'm excited to see what they do with that spot, because it is, as Cecil said, a spot we need to keep our eye on in terms of looking at the rest of this defense. That's where I'm mentioning them, that creativity at certain times in games can come into play.
All right, guys, sadly, that's all the time we have for this week's edition of Broncos Beat. You know, I appreciate the insight today and over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, this is the final episode of Broncos Beat that will be airing on KTVD Channel 20. We'll be taking some time, though, between now and training camp to revamp this show, and we'll return on July 26th on YouTube, DenverBroncos.com, and the Broncos OTT channel. Until then, thank you so much for watching Broncos Beat. We will see you July 26th.